Brazil doesn't just exist, it performs. It is a nation stitched together by the rhythm of drum, the roar of oceans, and 200 million hearts that beat in perfect, offbeat time. In February, Carnival explodes. Feathers and fire, sweat and glitter, joy sharpened into something almost supernatural. The streets pulse like a living organism, as if the entire country decides to dance away its demons for one sacred week. In football, it isn't a sport here, it's a holy communion. Legends like Pelé, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, saints of the pitch who turn stadiums into cathedrals, and the beautiful game into something divine. But Brazil holds more than celebration and talent. Beneath the music, beneath the beaches, beneath the wide-eyed wonder of the Amazon's emerald crown, there lies a quiet strangeness. This is a land where faith and science argue in the same sentence, where spirits are neighbors, and where uncertainty is the national language. Here, mystery is not a visitor, it is a resident. So when two men climbed a lonely hill in Rio in 1966, wearing raincoats on a sunlit day, carrying a coded message, and placing lead masks over their eyes as if shielding themselves from a blinding revelation, Brazil didn't just witness a tragedy, it inherited a riddle, one that refuses to die. Because some truths are so blinding, you need a mask just to survive them. The silence didn't break for 3 days. It finally shattered on August 20th. Not by a detective, but by an 18-year-old boy, Jorge da Costa Alves, chasing a stray kite. He pushed through the dense brush of Niterói, a difficult, tangled terrain that locals usually avoided. The air grew heavy. The sweet, sick smell of decomposition hit him before the sight did. And then, he saw them. Two figures lying side by side in the tall grass. Jorge ran, but the terrain was so unforgiving that police and firefighters couldn't reach the bodies until the next day. When Detective Oscar Nunes finally cordoned off the area, the scene defied basic logic. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, no weapons. Beside the bodies lay an empty water bottle and 2 wet towels. But the most confusing detail was in their pockets. A significant sum of money, roughly 3 million cruzeros, sat untouched. If this was a robbery, the thief left a fortune behind. The police were baffled. The initial statement from the coroner struck a nerve that vibrated through the whole country. Cardiac arrest of unknown cause. No poison was immediately found. No bullets, no knives. Just 2 healthy men who lay down, protected their eyes, and simply stopped living. As the bodies were carried down the hill, the timeline began to blur. The physical evidence was pristine, but the reason was invisible. The police had the what, the where, and the when. But as the autopsy began, they realized the why was the answer they feared most. The fear didn't come from what the police found. It came from what was missing. If this was a murder, where was the violence? If this was a suicide, where was the note? To understand the end, detectives had to go back to the beginning. Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were not mystics living in a cave. They were electronics technicians from Campos, men of wires, circuits, and logic. They understood how to fix televisions, how to transmit signals. So why did 2 men of science walk into a mystery? The investigation retraced their final hours and a disturbing pattern emerged. They arrived by bus at 2:30 p.m. They bought waterproof coats. They stopped at a bar to buy a bottle of mineral water. And here, we find the only cracks in their armor. A witness, a waitress, told police that Miguel looked nervous. He kept checking his watch. He told Manuel, "We have to hurry." They weren't acting like men on a leisure trip. They were acting like men with an appointment. But when the timeline ended on the autopsy table, science failed them. The coroner, Dr. Astor Pereira de Mello, found himself staring at a biological dead end. Because of the delay in retrieving the bodies, the internal organs were too decomposed for reliable toxicology. They could test for arsenic, for mercury, and they found nothing. Cardiac arrest, the report said. But hearts don't just stop and sink without a trigger. Did they take a capsule? Did they drink something in that water? Or, as some detectives whispered in the hallways, did they simply die of fright? The case stalled because the law is built for criminals, not explorers. There was no robbery to solve, no enemy to catch. The prevailing theory among detectives today is not homicide. It is that Manuel and Miguel didn't go up that hill to die. They went up there to perform an experiment. They believed that by blocking their sight with lead and opening their minds with something else, they could tune into a frequency the rest of us can't hear. They weren't running from death. They were reaching for the divine. The tragedy is, some frequencies aren't meant for human ears. The roadmap for this experiment was hiding in Miguel's pocket, a small, damp notebook. Inside, among serial numbers for electronic parts, was a set of instructions that read less like a diary and more like a technical manual for the soul. The entry was precise, clinical, chilling. 1630, be at the agreed place. 1830, swallow capsules. After effect, protect metals. Wait for signal mask. This changed everything. They weren't victims of a random attack. They were following a schedule. Swallow capsules suggested a catalyst, a drug to open the mind. But wait for signal suggested something far more unsettling, a partner. When the press published these words, the case mutated. It stopped being a crime. It became a phenomenon. In the coffee shops of Rio, on the street corners of Niterói, the fear was electric. The city stopped looking at the ground and started looking at the sky. Newspapers sold out in minutes because the notebook implied a transaction. 2 men brought the bodies. They brought the masks. But who, or what, was supposed to be on the other end of that signal? After the notebook was revealed, logic left the building. Brazil didn't just speculate. It hallucinated. The hill where they died was already known as a hotspot for UFO sightings. Locals whispered about strange lights hovering over Morro do Vintém just days before the bodies were found. Spiritualists claimed the lead mass weren't for the sun, but for the blinding luminosity of an extraterrestrial craft. The theory was seductive. Manuel and Miguel weren't dying. They were departing. But while the country looked at the stars, 2 families were left staring at empty chairs. Because beneath the headlines, these were not just the masked men. They were fathers. They were husbands. Manuel Pereira de Cruz was married to Nelly. Miguel Jose Viana left behind a wife and young children who waited for a return that never came. For the world, the mystery was a puzzle to solve. For Nelly and the children, it was a silence to endure. While the police chased aliens and spies, the families were left with the hardest truth of all. Whatever their experiment was, it failed, and the cost of their curiosity wasn't paid in lead or capsules. It was paid in grief. As Brazil tried to explain 2 men who died with masks over their eyes, one truth remained constant. The universe doesn't owe us clarity. Manuel and Miguel reached for a signal. They reached for something greater than themselves. And whatever answered, they couldn't survive it. But this was not the last time brilliant minds pushed too close to an unseen boundary. Because on the most remote outpost on Earth, at the bottom of the world, another signal was waiting. Next, we traveled to Antarctica, to the baffling death of Rodney Marks, a mystery carved into the ice. If Brazil taught us anything at all, it's that the unknown doesn't care about geography. Stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, not every signal is meant to be answered.